The multiple listing service of Northwest Indiana has played a major role in the growth and development of the region, from Munster to Michigan City and all points in between. The term multiple listing came into being in the 1920s and was an outgrowth of the common practice in the urban areas of Baltimore, Chicago, and Detroit when realtors came together through their local boards to exchange information on their listings. By 1971, the National Association of Realtors approved policy to standardize the practice of exchanging to address the prevailing problems of commission price fixing, sign regulation, and other legal issues confronting the industry. Through the adoption of the NAR's 14 points, local boards of realtors were given specific guidelines for the proper operation of an MLS. It was during the period of the 70s that the MLS began to grow as a vitally important tool to the real estate industry. We have come a long way from the early days of the smoke-filled rooms of the board exchange meeting, composed primarily of men, where information was conveyed by word of mouth, to the day and age where virtual home tours can be viewed on the internet from anywhere in the world. Over the years, the purpose has been the same: to provide a facility for the orderly correlation and dissemination of listing information among participants so that they may better serve their clients, customers, and the public. On January 10, 1949, the Hammond Board of Realtors, a forerunner of the Greater Northwest Indiana Board of Realtors, formed its first MLS committee. 3 months later, the region's first MLS was formed, composed of 30 companies. At that time, a 7-room brick house in Hammond could be purchased for $16,000. Luther G. Bloomberg, who has been a realtor in Northwest Indiana for over 50 years, was one of its founding members and served as a first vice president.
Back in 1947, I moved into the territory here from Grand Rapids, Michigan. And before I had gone to Lansing, Michigan, and obtained a salesman's license, and I worked for Kinsey and Buys, a pretty good size realtors in Grand Rapids. And when I got down here, we had no license law in Indiana, so I could go ahead and sell real estate, insurance, anything I wanted to do. And so that I did. But being new in the neighborhood, had no relatives, no friends personally, it was tough for me to get a listing. And having had experience in the Grand Rapids office, they had multiple listings there. And I never wanted to be a member of the unemployed, so I said, man, why don't I get with some of the boys here and the girls that were selling real estate and see if we couldn't exchange listings. Well, at that time, the economics weren't good, that's for sure. And when they got a listing, they said, no, we're not going to share this with anybody. We're going to sell them ourselves. Well, it took me almost 2 years of egging these guys and girls on that let's get together and do something about it. And finally, there was 4 of us got together and said, we should do this. We had to get permission from the Hammond Board of Realtors then to do this. And at their board meeting, they finally gave us the permission to go ahead. And as far as I'm concerned, that was the beginning of the multiple listing service in Hammond, Indiana. Well, from that time on, this thing has grown beyond my comprehension. In fact, all I can say is from small acorns, large oaks grow. And here we are, 1,800 licensed brokers, salespeople in Northwest Indiana.
Robert H. Wellington, board president in 1949, stated that the service will be the means of making real estate an investment, which can be liquidated far more quickly than heretofore. Over the years, the MLS took on different means of conveying the orderly correlation and dissemination of listing information. First, it was file cards, with the data which had to be updated weekly. Then, there were loose leaf pages with text that was kept in a binder. Neither had photos. It wasn't until the 1970s that bound books, made popular by the R.L. White Company of Louisville, Kentucky, became the standardized means throughout the country for MLSs to compile and distribute information.
It changed our way of doing business so much. For instance, we were a small office, and we could tell a prospective customer that if he wanted this house, and we just give us a $100 deposit, and we would hold it for 3 or 4 days while he made up his mind. And when multiple listings come along, you could no longer do that. And it changed our way of doing business in many other ways. About the listings for be available to everybody, which we was not accustomed to, and that opened up a whole new volume of listings for each one of us brokers, which most of us liked at the time, and most of us, I think, eventually agreed with everything. We changed bylaws because of this. I was on the listing forms, and also the offer to purchase forms. Those were offer to purchase forms were revised quite often because we found out that we had to do business different than we'd been accustomed to.
Then in the late 1970s, the Realtron Corporation of Detroit began marketing the first computerized MLS product in the Midwest. Automation took the industry by storm. Soon, other MLS book publishers, like the Moore Data Corporation of Minneapolis, followed with their versions of computerized MLS databases.
I feel the MLS is very important to our industry. It opens up all the inventory to people who are in the market for homes. The salespeople have the advantage of being able to offer any home in a certain range to that buyer, and it makes it a much healthier industry. If we didn't have the MLS, they would be out looking from door to door and shopping from company to company, and this way it really helps to standardize the way we do business. It standardizes forms. It gives us specific guidelines to work with. It gives us, listing information and history, which is very important in doing business, particularly appraisals today for the MLS. I think some of the most significant developments that we have seen in the MLS is the evolution of the computerized system. Way back in the early days, we got the first computer. We had an office down on State Street in Hammond on the second floor, and the computer came in and was about the size of a telephone booth. And it didn't work too good, but we worked hard to get it operational. And some of the small brokers like Lloyd Boyd and Harold Kenny and some of those small brokers didn't like it, so they withdrew from the MLS at that time. So at the end of about a year, we discarded that big computer, went back to the old system, and then they came back into the MLS, which was just one of those bumps in the road along the way. But the computer has been a very significant part of developing the MLS. Now today, I think the internet is going to step in and probably, along with the computer, revolutionize our business. I'm a little concerned about what the future holds because the mom and pop operations, of which I started out as one, no longer can really exist to any degree. The big franchises are taking over. I look several years down the road to see that maybe AT&T or Ameritech or maybe the National Association of Realtors will be the one dominant force moving real estate in our world today. It's just bound to happen. You buy cars on the internet, you're going to be able to buy houses on the internet. You can view the homes inside and out, call up and make an offer on it. It's just going to be that simple.
Everybody had the computer systems, the programs, the MLS on computer, and now the new wave seems to be the internet. And put your MLS on the internet, which not only expands our market area, expands our co-op area, it's also, I think the internet is a very big feature for buyers. Whereas before a buyer could not really get any information from an MLS, in the future, it's possible off the internet they can get all the information they want. And I think it's really going to expand our market area.
It got a mixed reaction, just as things in technology do now. There were people who embraced it right away because of the fact that it brought things instantly online, and made the updates, these things that you had to try to keep up to date with manually. It brought them online instantly, and it made life a lot easier for those who would take the time and the effort to get into the technology. We still had the book, as we still do, and there was a long period of time before a large percentage of the agent population really got into getting online. But then the migration happened, and as they saw how important it was to be up to date with the current listings and changes that were automated, then people got more and more into it. There are still, even to this day, people who just don't even want to use the computer at all, would rather just use the book, but that's such a small minority now.
During the 1970s, regionalization began to take a foothold in the Northwest Indiana real estate industry. The Hammond, Gary, East Chicago, and Merrillville boards of realtors in Lake County all merged to form the Calumet Board of Realtors, which eventually became the Northwest Indiana Board of Realtors. A similar path was being taken in Porter County with the merger of the Valparaiso, Hobart, and East Porter County boards into the Duneland Association of Realtors. Then, in 1994, the Northwest Indiana Board of Realtors merged with the Duneland, South Lake, and Jasper Newton boards of Realtors to form the Greater Northwest Indiana Association of Realtors. A major impetus of these mergers was the desire to have a combined MLS service throughout the region. At about the same time, the new organization unveiled its new electronic lockbox service, a state-of-the-art system made available by the Supra Corporation of Oregon. This past year, the NIAR MLS joined the Chicagoland area lockbox service in order to upgrade its service and maintain costs.
Some of the things had to do with the consolidations that have taken place, because those are some of the events that made life easier and better, I guess, for agents and for consumers, because with the consolidations we brought more data together and made it available to more people more easily. And where at one time you may have had to belong to 2 or 3 multiple listing services to get all the data, and then you had, if you did that, you had to look through the resources of 3 multiple listing services to get all the data. That was very significant. And each consolidation has brought better things, and of course the progress in technology has been part of it, but I think more important has been the consolidations. The other thing that has been a real significant change is the changes that have taken place in the last few years in agency. That has really changed the whole mindset of the real estate industry. And I think we're right now seeing the next change that's taking place, and that is the impact of the internet and the empowerment that that's giving to the consumer. And it's changing the way we'll interact with the consumer significantly, and we'll do so over the next several years. Well, each one of these things that we're talking about has been a productivity issue, and that was a productivity issue that was really important, especially with consolidation. When, in a time when, before consolidation, when you really had to confine yourself for the most part to a fairly small area, it might not have made as much difference. But with consolidation and with covering large geographical areas, if you had to chase keys, which you often did, you might have to go all the way to Valparaiso to pick up a key for a house in Portage and then return the key. So the time that you spent just chasing around retrieving and returning keys was phenomenal. And that really has made an impact in the productivity, I think, of the agent and the convenience of the consumer too, because with the lockbox being right there and the agent not having to chase around, very often I think the consumer got better service, because there might be properties that they just wouldn't be able to see very easily because it was going to be too much of a problem to chase down the keys all the way to some remote location.
NIAR took the lead in 1996 when it became one of the first MLSs in the country to put its active home listings on the newly emerging Internet Cyber Homes website. Today, the NIAR posts its listings on 3 Internet home advertising services, including Realtor.com and the Chicago Tribune Homes site. And soon, all properties will be loaded on the Times newspaper's newly designed website. Forms have been an important part of the Northwest Indiana Realtor Organization's service for many decades. In 1997, the NIAR developed Chicagoland's first computerized Forms on Disk service. In July of this year, all forms were made accessible in a downloadable format from the organization's internet website.
Originally, all our forms were the old-fashioned way. They were 4 or 5-part NCR that you had to write the offer up on and tear the sheets off and give parts to different people. Well, a couple years ago, we came up with Forms on Disk, and it really brings a lot of professionalism to our business and to our industry because it looks so much better because everything is all typed out and goes together a whole lot better. So anyhow, we originally had Forms on Disk, and it was optional. Different member firms could buy it, and our firm embraced it, and I bought it for all the agents. And with technology, today all of our agents have computers, so we not only installed Forms on Disk on our computers within the office, but the agents put it on their home computers. A lot of them carry notebook computers, so they have it on that, so they can actually take it to an appointment if they had their own printer. So as time elapsed, now in the most current thing that we've done is we've gone to Forms on Disk available to the entire membership. And originally, the only way you could get Forms on Disk was with the 3.5-inch floppies, and you'd slide them into your drive and install all the different updates and whatnot. Well, now with NIAR's website, they're available right there. You're able to go into the internet, which almost all agents have access to now anyways, and you go to the website, and you're able to download the Forms on Disk right directly to whichever computer you like. You can also make copies of it from the website, and then you can do updates if you have the existing programs on there. So it's been a wonderful addition, I think, and again, it really brings a level of professionalism up.
In June of this year, the NIAR MLS unveiled its new Internet Open House service to provide higher visibility to members' open houses, utilizing the Internet technology.
Well, NIAR's new open house service that we have on the Internet, in cooperation with the Greater Northwest Indiana Association of Realtors Internet site, not only has provided another service for our members, as being able to advertise their open houses. However, it also gives the public a place to search for open houses, and it also gives them the opportunity to find out more about Realtors and the Greater Northwest Indiana Association of Realtors.
Internet-based MLS systems are the next phase of the multiple listing service, which will allow members to access the system from any Internet connection, and NIAR is in the forefront.
And as for the internet-based MLSs themselves, these are going to allow much faster access to the MLS data for the realtors. And they should encounter less busy signals in trying to get into their MLS system. It also will allow the MLSs themselves to service a wider geographic area and service more members in a better fashion without incurring astronomical telephone costs.
With such a rich history behind it, the Greater Northwest Indiana Association of Realtors multiple listing service does not plan to rest on its laurels.
As I think back to 20-some years ago, starting in the real estate business, and I think about our multiple listing service, we actually met on Tuesday mornings as a whole MLS. We had a lot of fun. We still do. But we met as an entire MLS, all 40 or so of us. I remember at Citizens Federal on 45th and Munster. We all had donuts. We all rode together on home tour. We carried a dime at that time for the payphone in case we saw a house that we thought was right for our consumer, our customer. We'd stop immediately at the payphone and call them and tell them about it. And of course, today we have access where we don't need dimes, but it costs us a little more to use that item. And we've grown in numbers to, nearly 2,000 now in our MLS. And That's changed quite a bit in that we don't know everybody first name basis with faces, but on the other hand, we're providing superior service to our buyers and sellers. And being spread across the regional MLS as we are today is definitely a trend that we're going to see throughout the state and country. And why? Because that's what the consumer wants, and they'll require it to happen. So I see us moving not only to statewide MLSs, but probably eventually national MLS.
I really don't see the internet as bringing about the death of the realtor. I see it opening up a lot more opportunities for realtors in the future. One of the things you have to consider is that the consumers that are using the internet today to shop for properties will be sellers tomorrow. And I think one of the valuable commodities or components that the internet brings to the transaction is that it allows all parties to the transaction to have real-time access to any phase of the transaction. I think realtors that are part of this new network world that we live in will not just survive, but will thrive.
The role of the realtor, I think, is going to remain pretty much the same. I just look at the realtor as becoming a facilitator in a transaction. Of course, the public is going to have a lot more access to what homes are on the market. That won't be a big thrust. But our job is going to be to guide the public through the home buying process by helping them choose their homes, price their homes, working with lenders, inspectors, environmental people, attorneys, insurance, fair housing issues, and the closing process. There's a lot involved in buying a home, and we'll just maintain that.
As I look at the next decade in real estate and think back 10 years, 15 years, and more years than I want to sometimes, the changes, as we all know, in the last 10 years have been unbelievable, with the introduction mainly of technology. As I look at the next decade, I believe that, one, we're going to see less people in the real estate business as we know it today. The reason for that is that's what the consumer wants, in that they want someone that's truly, truly professional and dedicated to their needs and services that they want provided. Along with that comes the cost of technology, the ability to use the technology through knowledge and so forth, and that's going to limit many people, unfortunately. So I see our numbers, if you will, in the business shrinking. I also think that the consumer is in charge today. They get what they want. I think we're all aware of that, and that's why the internet is so widespread and growing the way it is. I believe that the consumer will eventually require us to unbundle, quote unquote, our services. I think many, many companies are positioning themselves to be a one-stop shop, and the major franchises definitely are doing that throughout the country, and our company too. At this time, they receive all of those services for the base fee, if you will. But there's a trend throughout the country where they're starting to unbundle the services, and the buyer and or seller is saying, I want A, C, and D, but not item B. And they'll pay for only those items. So I think that's probably something that we're going to see happen more and more. But more importantly, the requirement for our members, the Realtor, to be more and more professional and really, really dedicated to a career. And I think that's where we're headed in the next decade.
Under all is the land. In many ways, the multiple listing service is the highway that transports property information throughout the land. The road that brings young families their first home in the suburbs. The road that brings urban pioneers back to the cities. The road that brings seniors to retirement condominiums. Or the road that leads investors to their future nest eggs. The MLS is the lifeblood of the real estate industry. The MLS is the vehicle that will take you wherever you want to go.